Good morning. Glad that you can be a part of our last week in our family series, which we're calling Targeting. Not Targeting, but Target. That makes you a little nervous when I start saying targeting, and I've got arrows in my hand, right? Which we're learning to live towards the target. That's the whole idea of the series. This is a part of our family emphasis thing. Kind of the basis for this whole series has been Psalm 127. That's kind of our foundation. And let's look at a particular couple of verses this morning as we start off. It says, like arrows, that's these little suckers, in the hands of a warrior. Does it kind of excite you, the parents, to be called warriors, that your children are like arrows in the hands of warrior? You know, just kind of, I envision kind of the Lord of the Rings. Let's make sure it's different. Are the children of one's youth that you're getting ready to launch these units. And he goes on to say, oh, how, what's that next word? Blessed. That means that's what you are and I am as a parent. We are blessed because God has given us this gift from him that we call children. And he says, oh, how blessed are you parents with your quivers full of children. And so however many that makes for your quiver to be full, for some people it's more, some people it's less. We had 3 children in our quiver, and I decided at the end of releasing all of them, that was about right for us, you know, and so you just have different ones. It's kind of a picture that Solomon's making as the home, as an archery range, you know. So mom and dad, we're talking about what's at the center of that. What's the target that we are supposed to be heading towards? We've got these different arrows. We've got equipment to be able to launch those arrows. We've said every arrow is different. Some arrows are very smooth. Some of them are a little warped as we get them ready to launch. Some of them have different characteristics, different points, different personalities, different attitudes that God places within our hands. And it is our joy and privilege to be able to figure out how we can best take that arrow and launch it towards a particular target. Now, what is that target? You know, I think we'll let Jesus answer that question because after all, we're all followers of Jesus. And it's interesting that every time he was asked a particular question about what's the target or what's the most important commandment, he answers the same thing every time. Every single time, it's always the same answer that he gives. And he goes back to the Old Testament, to Deuteronomy chapter 6. And so when people ask him on many different occasions, Jesus always answered the same thing. He says this from Deuteronomy chapter 6. He says, would you read it with me? Love Lord your God with your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These words that I'm commanding you today must be kept in mind. So what he's saying is you've got to keep the target in mind. Our desire to launch our kids is to be able for them to have this thirst within them that they will love God with an intensity within their lives, with all their heart, with all their mind, with all their soul, with all their strength. That is what we are training them for. That is what we are launching them towards. This whole idea that in every area of their life, that this attitude, this pursuit of loving God permeates that. Now, there are lots of things that are important in people's lives, and we I think we understand that. There are other things like, I mean, you want your kids to have good nutrition, right? I mean, many of you moms, you know, from very early on, you're preparing food, no processed foods, things like that, in order so that your child will grow up. That's important. But it's not the most important. There's activities that your child may become involved with that can be important, but it's just not as important as loving the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Their education, their activities, their sports, whatever it might be, those are things that we kind of have to learn how to balance. There's so many good things we have to balance. But Jesus says there's one goal. And the idea is this target permeates everything that there is, whatever they do. I mean, if you put the planet around anything other than the sun, nothing's going to work correctly. And if we don't focus on loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, our whole building of our home will be in vain. It'll be a waste. And so we've talked about that's our aim. We also talked about the idea that there are rhythms that we need to establish within our homes, rhythms that build into our lives this whole idea of loving the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so Moses goes on and says this about our families. He says, talking about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, he says, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. What he's saying is there are informal times and there are formal times of teaching. Those things are those times of training. And you get the opportunity as a parent to be able to be in on all those situations when teachable moments come up that you can help train your child to love the Lord your God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. I think I shared, I can't remember which service I shared this with last Sunday, but we took our 6 grandchildren shopping with us to fill the shoe boxes that we sent out for children in different parts of the world for Christmas. And it was so much fun, but it gave us some great teaching opportunities about sharing and about loving the Lord God. And you get such insight into your grandkids or your children while you're doing those opportunities. And it gives you a great opportunity to impress them. I love the things. There are things that I hear now as being a grandpa that I never noticed being a dad. Does anybody ever had that experience? Those of you who are grandparents. I didn't notice some of the conversations that at times went on between my children. I noticed them more with my grandkids. I wished I'd paid a little closer attention when my kids were growing up. But I think I shared this, but it was so funny because Micaiah, who's 7, one of Mallory's 4 kids, he's not really into sports. There's some sports that he likes. I mean, Pokemon cards, for some reason, is his world. He wants to trade them. He looks over every one of them, things of that nature. But he's tried doing soccer, and he doesn't really like soccer. He's beginning to like basketball. That got scored points with Grandpa. And so we bought this soccer ball to go inside the shoebox and deflated it, and he said, Papa, why are we getting this kid a soccer ball? He may not even like soccer. And I said, well, the countries that we're sending to, that's the sport that they like. And he's like shaking your head, that can't happen. Nobody should like soccer. And so we prayed over the boxes, before doing it. And this was Micaiah's prayer. He said, and God, direct this box to some kid who can actually appreciate soccer. A great moment of being a grandpa. But we did this whole exercise of them picking out gifts and things of that nature just to say, hey, because we love God, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try to enrich the lives of some kids who don't have all the things that you have. And so we want to build that into it. And so there's certain rhythms that we can have within our lives to be able to help them to do that. And rhythm, and today we're talking about release. In archery and in parenting, the name of the game is releasing the arrow towards the target. I mean, you just got to let it go, let it go. It doesn't have to bother me anymore. I can't hold it in anymore. Let it go. Let it go. The cold never bothered me anyway. Actually, cold does kind of bother me. And bothered me that Frozen 2 came out. I'm going to have to listen to that song 9 million times more over the next year. But the whole idea, the whole purpose, this has nothing to do with Frozen. I don't know how that came into my mind, but I wish it had gone on through. The whole idea is releasing. Opening the door, as she says in the song, and slamming it shut and letting them go, I've asked my friend Tim Galloway to come this morning. Tim, come on out. He's my archery person, which I have no skill in archery whatsoever. So, Tim, you were here on their first week, and you want me to hold this? Oh, yeah, okay.
If I ever make it to the pearly gates, I can show them I was here on deer season.
It's not works-based, brother. It's grace all the way, all right?
Need some insurance.
You need some insurance, okay? So, so we talked the last time about the importance of setting up, you know. You have a stance you're supposed to get in, is that right?
To shoot?
Yeah, to shoot there, not going towards the pearly gates. It's best on your knees, but okay. And then your aim and the rhythm that you get into. Why are those sorts of things important? I mean, let's just say, I know that you gave up being out in the woods today as a personal request of mine.
First time?
Yeah, first time. And let's just say you're in the tree stand and a 24-point buck walks across and the deal. So what do? Do you whistle and say, sit, deer, sit? Is that what you do?
Well, usually when I get done putting all that corn out, they just come right in and
You got
pose
pictures
for me.
from Facebook from other deer that you
Yes.
planted there? Okay,
Yes.
all right. So let's just get to the chase. Tell me what the importance of your setup and release is. Why is that so important?
Well, we have to practice a lot because when it comes to that point, we're looking at our target. Our target can move and doesn't want us to shoot it. So we have to be prepared in our draw and our release and everything. That part has to be natural. It has to be something we've done over and over and over again, so I don't have to focus on that part.
So you're practicing that before you ever go out in the
Yes.
woods, getting that rhythm. Okay.
Yep.
So here's a target over here for you.
Okay.
It's dark. I've purposely not had any lights over in that thing. We've removed the praise team from backstage. So can you aim and release an arrow towards that target?
I couldn't last week, and that's why I didn't do it last time. but I think I might.
I'm going to stand behind you. Whoa, and they're bullseye, all right. Okay, so that is what we're trying to do with our children, releasing them and hitting, gosh, that's right in the bullseye there. You know? and Tim is so humble. Give him applause so we can get him off the stage when we can this morning. So here's the deal. The whole purpose of our parenting, the whole thing is to releasing them towards the target of loving the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But it's really not about all the things, the peripheral things. I mean, you can dress up looking like the Lord of the Rings, you know, with the bow and arrow in your hand, thinking that you're Legolas or whoever that guy is, and that, you know, they can shoot like 6 arrows and make them go different ways, you know. We can put those ideas, but the whole purpose of it is to be able to get the arrow in the right spot, build the rhythm so we can release it towards the target. But if you don't let the arrow fly off from the string, you can't possibly hit the target. Arrows are meant to fly. I looked up on WikiHow 12 steps to shooting an arrow, okay? I wasn't sure whether Tim was going to be in the woods, so I needed to have some ammunition storage. So I want you to hear this. Step 9 of the 12 steps for archery. You know, there's 12 steps for lots of different things in our life. All right, so step number 9 was on the release. Release the arrow by relaxing the fingers of your string hand. While this may sound simple, the manner in which you release your finger from the bowstring impacts the arrow's flight. The aim is to get as clean of a release as possible, and this will probably take some time and practice. Problems that you may encounter when releasing the bow include flinching, wobbling, or anticipating the shot inaccurately. Anything that deflects the string from the way you remove your fingers can alter the arrow's course. So he says a clean of release as possible. And that's what we're wanting to do with the release of our children out and towards the target and going out into the world. And I believe that it calls for somewhat of a dramatic change in our mindset, our mentality, and our practices from the time we receive the child, whenever a child is first born into our family, until the time that we release them. I know that when each of my children were born, I didn't want to give them back to the doctor, you know? I mean, they were born, I wanted to hold them. I was walking around, you know, showing it off to the nurse, showing each of my 3 girls off to the nurses. You know, they were there too, but this is my daughter, you know? And you've got this clutch on them, and you worry about them constantly and things like that. That's a gripping of things. And there needs to be this thing within our life with the realization that we received this gift from God and we are releasing it, all right? We're trying to figure out ways that we can release that child to go on to whatever God has in store for him in their life. So this morning, I want to kind of talk to you about 3 things that we need to keep in mind before and during the release phase of the family. The first is that we need to keep from the beginning, make the end in mind, keep the end in mind from the very beginning. I mean, when's the best time to start thinking about the blast off or the launch, the release? It's from the very beginning when you first receive that child from God. You know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bam, there's a blast off. Should we start thinking about it when they're a junior in high school or when they're a sophomore in college or when they graduate from college? No, that's not the time. We need to start from the very beginning with the realization that God has given us this child on loan from him from the very beginning, and we are to train them for release. I see this so well in Hannah in the Old Testament. Hannah was told by God that the dream of her heart, which was to have children, was going to come to pass. She had prayed for children for years, and she was unable to overcome infertility. And everyone thought it was impossible for her to have a child. And so she prays this prayer. It's recorded for us in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10. She made a vow saying, "O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me, not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life." So she's saying from the very beginning, God, I'm going to receive this gift. If I have a child, I'm going to receive this gift with the idea of releasing him. I will return him to you, you know. And God granted her request and gave to her and her husband a son they named Samuel, who many people believe is one of the greatest prophets in all the Old Testament. And when the baby was born, she gave him back to the Lord. 1 Samuel chapter, go back one if you would. No, keep going back if you would. Have we missed something? Yes, oh, here we go. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked him. So what's that next word? I dedicate him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is dedicated to the Lord. There is a sense that when God grants us this gift called children, that we make a mental and sometimes a physical act of saying, I know I've received it from you, God, but I'm dedicating him or her to you. It's kind of what we do in our parent-child dedication service. It's really an act of when the parent says, yes, I have received this gift called a child, a baby from God. It's a gift from him. It's a blessing from him. But it's God's. I'm just the steward over this child. I'm not the owner. And that's an important attitude to have in our child rearing, to understand that this child is on loan to God, and it's the action of a steward. An owner holds something because it's theirs, and we tend to grasp those things very, very tightly. And a steward says, I've been tasked with the responsibility as an assignment that you've given me. If you had asked me to house sit for you, it wouldn't be a good idea, but if you did, I would come into your house and I would serve as your proxy. I would carry out whatever your desires are. It wouldn't be my house, but I am to keep this house and use it in congruence with whatever your desires are to take place. I'm the steward. I'm not the owner. Proof, that's true in every area. And the proof is even in our own lives. We are just on loan from God. Our life is. We enter this world with nothing. We leave this world with nothing. When you come into this world, you're naked, and before long they slap you on the bottom and you're crying. So that's the way you come into the world. And many of us will go out of the world the same way, naked and screaming. But the idea is that we're just here on loan, that God has given us this gift, and we are to use it as a steward. And with every steward, there's a day of reckoning on the subject of how well you steward whatever was entrusted you. Did you steward this gift, whatever it might be, child, resources, whatever it is, in congruence with the desires of the owner? I mean, want to talk about a nanny cam? God's got the best nanny cam, right? He knows everything that's going on. Our owner is always watching. Always watching. How are you doing with the things that I've entrusted to you? I've given you this resource. I've given you this gift. Are you being a good steward with that? Are you being a good steward in your children, representing and honoring the owner? And so we begin with the end in mind from the very beginning, and it guides us all along the journey. The second thing I think it's important for us to keep in mind is this, that children are supposed to leave, parents are supposed to stay. All right? Say that with me, all right? Children, you're not cooperating very well on this point. I think you're still scratching your head on this. Children are supposed to what? Leave. The marriage, all right, say it one more time. Children, the marriage is supposed to stay. Now, we get this from several passages, but at the very beginning, when the Bible starts talking about marriage in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and a woman also, and shall be united to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." In other words, there is this leaving from one family constellation and the establishment of a new family constellation. There is a leaving. There is one home with several people in it. A person leaves this home, a person leaves this home, and where there were two homes, now there's a third home, all right? And there's this whole idea that you're leaving in order to start something else. And there is a time in the rhythm of life for a coming and a going, a leaving. As a matter of fact, I mean, Proverbs 22:6 begins, as you well know, train up a child in the way he shall go. And that's the object of it, if they go, all right? The intention of every parent-child relationship is that the child leaves. Now, there's a sense in which they're always going to be there, and you can be there emotionally for the new family constellation as it's being established. But the intent is to release, and the rhythm of your parenting is to point towards them releasing at some point, releasing the arrow towards the go. Leaving the hand of the archer, the arrow flies towards the go. They are in their home, your home. They leave, they make their own home. Now, in your mind, when you're approaching parenting, it shouldn't be a mindset to leave that the marriage takes second place to the kids. Now, I know that's hard to grasp at times, but so often we forget that the primary relationship in the family is between the husband and wife. And if that's not kept strong, it damages the children. Does not help, it damages the children. And any time the children are placed in between the two spouses, that's when prominence comes. And we see it all the time in our society today. It's happening so often in our culture. We see so many marriages that just crumble and fall apart whenever the nest is empty. Why? A number of possibilities, but I'd submit to you a large part of that is that children of the family took a place of influence and prominence and priority, and they were never intended, never intended to be that way within the home. It was never to be that the children are placed over the spouse. Mom and dad ceased to be husband and wife because they were so focused on being mom and dad. Children were never meant to become the focal point in the center of the home. The only relationship that's to be the focal point in the home is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Then from that love of God, it flows into the marriage and then flows into the children. Friends, the greatest gift, listen to me, the greatest gift, those of you who are parents, that you can give your children is a rockin' marriage. To develop that relationship between the two of you, that gives stability to the home, and it's a great training and modeling to help them to develop their marriage the right way. Everyone wins when God is first, the marriage is second, and kids are third. Now, your kids in the midst of your marriage right now, if you're parenting, they're picking up clues of how to act in a relationship. Not only the relationship of marriage, but other relationships around it. And sometimes you can think, you are so clever. Well, we never argue in front of our kids. No, but they can hear you when you go in your bedrooms. I'm amazed at times when your children get older. Our girls are all older, have left the home, have families of their own. And when at times they talk about conflict, they will mention things that they heard that we never realized they heard at all. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. You know, it's a little intimidating. And yet at the same time, when we don't even realize it, we are taking those opportunities then to learn, and your kids are learning how to be in relationships. So that husband-wife relationship needs to have a prominence, because you will live longer with each other than you will with just your children if life goes the way it's intended to go. So the greatest gift you can give your children is to have a good marriage, and it's a great training, modeling to help them develop their marriage the right way. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. When God is first, the marriage is second, and children third. Third thing that we need to keep in mind as we go through this is do empower, don't hover. All right? Do empower, don't hover. I had a great idea for an illustration this morning. It didn't work out. I was going to have one of our people own a drone at this stage in the sermon, fly a drone up and just hover over my head as I talked about this whole point. There's only one problem, that in a building that has as thick of steel and a roof like we have, that the signals don't translate to the drone very well. And he said, I'm afraid I might crash it into your head. That would kind of ruin the illustration, so we don't have it. So just think that there's this drone hovering over my top of my head as I talk about this point. Okay, so the whole idea is, as parents, we're here to empower, not hover. I know this is going to sound like a rant, but too bad, how sad, all right? Parents, please, 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 don't be a helicopter parent. I want you to protect your children. I know that you want them to be successful, but if you're always hovering over your kids, attempting to stop every form of evil in their life to make sure they don't eat any grain of dirt ever in their life, you're not helping them. If you're making all the decisions for them, you're disrupting your rhythm and release in parenting. If every moment of their waking hour, you've got to be over them, hovering over them, making sure they don't contact anything that might hurt their feelings or something of that nature, you're not helping them. And every time they go off to some place and something happens, they make a stupid decision or something of that nature, if you're there stepping in for them, yes, it's got to be somebody else's fault, it can't be your angel's fault whatsoever, then you're not helping them at all. Let me just back up, all right? Hands. How many of you have ever made a stupid decision in your life? May I see your hands? Okay, a little bit more percentage than first service, I don't know. They're more in denial than you guys were. Everybody has made a stupid decision, amen? I could go further and ask how many of you made a stupid decision before you got to church today. Most of you would raise your hand also. All right, I know this is going to be a shock to you. I have made lots of stupid decisions in my life. And you know how I learned to make good decisions? By making lots of stupid decisions and finding out the consequences of the stupid decisions. And the result was that I thought, hey, that's not very smart. And I learned to make better decisions. And I sometimes had a coach called my parents. Other times there's other people within my life that said, you know what, James, that was really stupid. Here's some of the consequences of that. And they allowed me to experience the consequences. Parents, empower your kids. Give them the bandwidth to make stupid decisions. No, they'll be harmed for life. No, they won't. They will learn something that'll be useful for them for the rest of their life. And if you're always protecting them, if it's always the teacher's fault, sometimes it is the teacher's fault. If it's always the little league coach's fault, sometimes it is. But if it's your automatic default thing is, my baby could never be wrong, your baby's going to be in a lot of trouble when he goes out into the world. You won't be able to hover over him when he's 52 and still living at home. You will not be able to helicopter parent for him whenever he or she is out on their own and they make a stupid decision and they don't know how to handle that. And so as a result, they attack everybody around them and it becomes all their fault. You know, it's important to empower your kids to make good and bad decisions. Put some equilibrium into your pattern. I'm going to switch metaphors for a moment, all right? I love driving a standard car, a 5-speed car. When I bought my last car about 7 years ago, my personal car, I wanted to get a 5-speed. I've got this. I am gets in such a rut. I've had the same make or type of car for my last 4 cars, or maybe 5 cars. I know I put about 200,000 miles or plus on them. But I went in to buy, and the guy at the dealership that I'd done with said, hey, if you're going to buy a 5-speed this time, it's going to cost you $1,800 more. $1,800. It's supposed to be cheaper to have a manual shift than it is an automatic. $1,800. So I had a choice to remain true to my Scottish heritage or spend $1,800. I am Scotch through and through. I didn't have any scotch this morning, so I can tell you that. So, I don't know. So, I have an automatic transmission, but I love shifting gears. It's so much fun, but there is an art to it. I've had 3 girls. And in teaching them how to drive with a standard shift, I just realized that with each child, you have to get a new clutch because they wear it out. And you can give them instruction after instruction after instruction of how to do this. You know, you release the clutch and you give it more gas. You release the clutch, this and get, but they can't get it until they get in the car and destroy the clutch. They make some stupid decisions with it, all right? And so they've got to learn that feel that goes into it of disengaging the clutch and giving it more gas. And you always have to go to some hill and have them try to stop and then go up a hill so that they don't go back and crash and cause some harm to 4 or 5 people behind them when you're teaching them how to do a manual deal. It's just an art thing, you know? It's a feel that they have to do it, and the only way they can do it is to do it, to make those decisions. And the same way in parenting. Wisdom is needed to find that sweet spot between hovering and empowerment. Financial guru Dave Ramsey and his daughter Rachel Cruz have written a great book. It's called Smart Kids, Smart Money, or maybe Smart Money, Smart Kids. And they have a great illustration that has really not that much to do with money itself, excuse me, but it has to do with parenting and the balance and the equilibrium between hovering and empowering. The Ramseys said in their child rearing, they kind of had this imaginary rope that went around the waist of every one of their kids. And as time went on, you know, the parents had the spool of rope and they would let out the lead of the rope that was appropriate to the age and maturity of the child. And the idea was to teach responsibility and wise decision making to lead up to that inevitable time when you didn't have any rope anymore, that they were launched. Rachel, the daughter, Rachel Cruz, as she was telling this one story in that, she said she thought it was around age 11 or so that she wanted to go to the movies with some of her friends. And her mom asked, what's the movie? What's the movie about? Who your friends are you meeting with? And she said, I was rolling my eyes. I was just learning to perfect that at age 12. and going, why does she have to ask these questions? You know, I'm just going to a movie, just let me go to the movie, you know, but she wanted to know all these things. And so her mom takes her to the movie, lets her off. She sees her friends gathered there on the sidewalk. She says to Rachel, Rachel, I'll be back in 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'll just meet you right here on the sidewalk at that time, okay? Okay, Mom. She scampers off. Mom drives off. Well, Mom comes back in 2 hours and 10 minutes, and no Rachel. She can't find her. So she waits on the sidewalk. She parks her car, waits on the sidewalk, goes inside the theater, no Rachel. And she's coming out of the theater, and she's looking around, you know, where did I misplace my daughter? Where is she? What's she done? And coming across several lanes of traffic was her daughter and her friends running across the traffic, coming over towards where the theater was from a shopping mall across the street. And it turns out that one of the friends said, I heard this movie is boring. I don't really want to go to it. Let's go do some shopping. We'll have some ice cream across the street at the mall over there. So they went over there. And now, Mrs. Ramsey said, you know, I knew devil was not in the ice cream that was going to go and attack my daughter. You know, I knew she was safe and sound. But she said, I felt like this is a great training point to be able to talk. And so she said to her daughter, had you called me from the movie theater and asked if you changed plans, I could have said one of two things. I could have said, yes, that's a great idea. Have fun. I'll still see you in 2 hours and 15 minutes. Or I could have said, B, no, I'll be back and you stay right where you are and I'll come back and pick you up. But she said, Mrs. Ramsey said, Rachel, you don't know how I was going to answer. And it's going to remain a mystery because you didn't ask me. You didn't ask me at all. So the next time you ask to go to a movie, I'm still going to want to know what's the name of the movie, what's it about, who you're going with, and I'm going to come with you to the movies. And then I'll make sure that you go to the movies and not go get ice cream. And she said, I'm going to have to take some of that rope and pull it in a little bit closer to me. So I will be with you for a while as you go and do different things. Later on, Rachel said she was in high school. She just got her license, and she wanted to go to a party. And so she told her mom where the party was going to be. Her parents going to be there. Yes, there will be parents there. Okay, what time are you coming home? You know, all those things that parents ask during those things. And she said, well, just be sure you're home by 11:30. And so Rachel takes off, goes to the party. Well, there's no parents there at the party. And before long, several cases of beer worked their way into their party, and people were pairing off and going to different rooms. And so Rachel decided, you know, it's not a good idea for me to be here. So she made excuses, got in her car, and drove back home. And her mom was surprised when she got back home. And she said, Rachel, you're early. How come you came in so early? And she said, well, Mom, I decided it wasn't a good idea for me to be there. Why not? Well, here's what happened. She explained as going back. And she said, I just didn't want to be around that. So I made my exit and I drove back home. And Mrs. Ramsey looked at her daughter and said, here's some more rope. You get more rope, you know, because she made a good decision. And there is that equilibrium between hovering and empowering, you know. Rachel said she went to college. She went to a college that was local for 2 years to get some of her basics out of the way. Didn't cost as much money. She got a scholarship to go to another college that was like 500 miles away. And Dave Ramsey and his wife took her up, helped her get installed, and then about a week or so later, they went back to the college where she was now, and they had this big box. They said, we want to take you out to dinner. They went out to dinner at this nice restaurant, and Rachel kept looking in the box, what's in the box, and they wouldn't tell her. And so after the evening was over with, Dave Ramsey took this box, set it on the table, and said, open it. And he said, she opened it, and guess what was inside the box? Yeah, a big coil of rope. And they said, we don't have a 500-mile rope. And so we've been impressed with the good decisions that you've made and how you've learned from not so good decisions. Now you're 500 miles away and the rope is not that long, so we're handing the rope over to you. On the rope were tied different ribbons of different colors. And she said, well, what are these? And she said, the mom said, do you remember when? And she pointed out a time where she had made a good decision. And that was noted on the rope. And do you know, what's this color for? Well, this is the time when you didn't make such a good decision, but you were coachable. And you learned from that. And so this big bright red one, and she looked through the rope, and there were several of the type that where she had made stupid decisions, and some of them had the big red bows beside it. And she said, these are the ones where you learn by that. You are launched. You now have your own rope to do with it. You're in charge of the rope. Parents, that's what we're going for. Empowerment, not hovering. And we're looking for that equilibrium between hovering and empowerment. We're looking, listen, to taper decision making towards their maturity at whatever level they are. And we do that at the very beginning with small things that get bigger and bigger and bigger all the time until they become skilled, till your child becomes skilled in making godly, wise decisions for themselves. And that is the essence of parenting. Okay, everybody look up here for just a second. If you can just kind of focus in for just a minute. I won't keep you long, but I need your attention, okay? I did the first family series I ever did in 1973. I was neither married nor did I have children at that time. Just I'd let you know on that. So I had no experience, but I knew from my own life and friends around me and just observation that the most important aspect of who we are comes from our family. We learn, and much of who we are, much of that is from our basic family constellation. Good, bad, indifferent. That's where we are molded, okay? And I think you agree with that. I have also learned over 50 years of counseling with people that oftentimes we don't like the way we are parented growing up. And we often respond to that by going way off the other end of the way we're parented. Or we become very, very bitter and angry towards a parent or somebody who had great influence within our life. And I hear quite often in counseling, when talking about a dad or a mom, I am so angry of how they have hurt me. And you can just feel the bitterness well up inside of it. And you ask about what the relationship is to that person at that time, and they'll say, I don't want to spend a moment with that piece of, you fill in the blank. And there is such anger there. And as we continue to talk, here's what I find out. Their focus is so much in not wanting to be like that parent that they become like that parent. And it's true. Whatever you focus your sights on, whatever the emotional focus of your life is, whether you desire it or not, you become like it. And unless you figure out some way to deal with that bitterness or that anger, it will continue to scar you and succeeding generations after you because it follows it on down. Here's what I want you to understand. You can break that cycle. You can. And it is so very important that you do. I don't care what your age is right now in this auditorium. If you're 12 or 120, it's time for you to begin breaking that cycle of anger or bitterness that you become enslaved to. Because if you don't, it cripples the baton that you hand off to each of your children, and then grandchildren, and then great-grandchildren, because it continues through the family. So here's something I want to suggest to you to begin that process of breaking that cycle, that enslavement, if I can point that out to you. Trina and I went to see a movie yesterday. I wasn't sure I really wanted to go, but my wife always picks great movies. And I did not watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood growing up. Maybe some of you all did. You didn't. I was more into Captain Kangaroo, more intellectual, I suppose. But we went to see It's a Beautiful Day. And in the movie, Mr. Rogers is talking to a very successful journalist who is just eaten up with bitterness towards his dad. And Mr. Rogers, in having lunch with this guy, says to him, "Lloyd, who has made you who you are?" And the journalist would not answer that question because he realized how much of the anger that he had for his dad was coming out in his life. And so Mr. Rogers, in the midst of this restaurant, said, "I want you to do an exercise with me. We're going to take 1 minute, and I want you to think of all the people who have influenced your life, who have helped make you what you are and who you are right now. Who are those people?" And you could just see the journalist's face harden. He did not want to think about his dad. And he said, "Even your dad has helped shape who you are. You would not be as good a journalist as you are now in seeking answers if it wasn't for your dad." And so he turns to him and he said, "I'll give you a minute. Here's the project I want to give to you. Starting today, in just a moment, I want you to spend 1 minute a day thinking about who it is that has influenced your life and made you who you are. I don't care how old you are. You can think on this. You can do it. Do it for 1 minute. That's all. Just 1 minute. And we're going to practice it by doing it right now. All right? I want you just in silence right now. And we'll begin now for 1 minute. Think about who has influenced making your life who you are right now. Probably seemed like an hour. It was actually 1 minute. Now, here's the follow-up. I'm going to teach you a 3-word prayer that as you think of those who help make you who you are right now, good, bad, indifferent, 3-word prayer that will begin changing your perspective, that will help break that enslavement that you have towards bitterness. Okay? Here's the prayer. Say the first word with me. Thank you, God. Okay? Say it all at one time. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you. So each day this week, it's a great week to do it. This is Thanksgiving. 1 minute. Actually, it'll take you about 1 minute and 12 seconds. Okay? 1 minute and end by saying, thank you, God. Extra credit points, begin thinking about how even that person you hate has given you something valuable. And change that focus of your life to where you can pass on a baton that's not broken. Let's stand together. We're going to do this song not as an invitation this morning, but simply as a time of declaration, of realizing that I'm surrounded by the arms of the Father and by songs of deliverance in my life. And I no longer have to be enslaved to that bitterness in my life. Let's sing it as a declaration this morning.